Good evening and welcome to the August 13th Planning and Zoning Commission's meeting. If we can have a roll call, Shannon, please.
Messina.
Here.
Fleming.
Here.
Ingalls.
Here.
Lutrip.
Here.
Mandel.
Here.
Rumpler.
Here.
Ward.
Okay, if you can join me for the pledge, please. Thank you. At this time, any public comments, which would be anything besides what's on our agenda tonight? Anyone in the audience like to come up and speak? No? Okay. Commission comments at this time? Peter, you have anything to say?
I will at the last, sir. I'm writing it down right now.
Okay, I figured as much, but that's okay. Staff comments.
Good evening, Commissioners. Just a few things for you. We took a boat tour with KEA last week, so that's the Waterkeepers Boat Tour. And so we took 3 of the commissioners and several staff members and toured the north shore of the lake and a little bit of the Spokane River just to find out some of the challenges with development that's on the shoreline. And so we'll do kind of more of a report back to you guys via email. It's what we learned, but it was very informative for us to see some of the challenges of development and that interface with the shoreline and what that can do for pollution for the lakes. We had that. For September, we only have 1 item for Planning Commission for public hearing. There will be a special use permit request for a specialty retail use in a manufacturing zone for property on Northwest Boulevard. And then lastly, just wanted to remind you, for those of you who have signed up, tomorrow morning is the Missing Middle Housing Forum at North Idaho College. We have reached max capacity, so it's going to be a full house, but we're excited about the attendance, and we received over 178 survey responses, so that was great. So exciting to hear all of the input from community members, and we're looking forward to the panelist discussion with a lot of local panelists, and then a presentation by Tony Perez with Opticos Design. And he is here this evening. He's our next item on the agenda. He'll kind of talk about what does Opticos Design do and what is missing middle housing and what they've seen in other communities.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Is that televised tomorrow? Or
It's not televised. We're doing a recording, so that will be available on the website early next week, I believe. So as soon as that's available, we'll send out a link to that.
And who went on the boat cruise from our commissioners up
We
here?
had Commissioners Ingalls, Lutrip, and Ward.
Great.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
Peter or John, you have any comment on that boat cruise? Or
Well, there's just
anything that you saw that was interesting you'd want to pass on to us?
Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive is very, very nice, and it's just begging to be annexed for water and sewer,
Uh-huh. Okay.
from my observation. Well, you get spend a lot of time in the lake. I don't. And I was very surprised at the number of very large, nice houses on that lake. I mean, they're on our lake. It's wonderful.
John, anything?
Well, thanks. It was very informative. We were out there 2.5, 3 hours, I think it was. We toured the whole lake. I think what I took away is the lake, is our greatest resource. It's beautiful. It's when we talk about quality of life and whatnot, we all look towards the lake. But we learned it's very delicate, very delicate. And it lives in a very delicate balance with all of the zinc and cadmium and lead and all this stuff at the bottom. And what keeps it at the bottom from getting churned up and becoming a toxic stew is the amount of oxygen in the lake. It's that simple. And if you have a bunch of nutrients flowing into the lake, phosphorus and sediments and things like that deplete the oxygen, the stew can turn over and you could have a lake that is just horrible, And so we have to be very cautious of all of the sedimentation, the phosphorus, the fertilizer, all these things that flow into the lake. And, our precious resource could be gone in a delicate balance if we're not careful. So.
No, great. All right, appreciate it. Thanks for the time. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Thank you. At this time, we're going to have, I guess, Tony Perez, who I was lucky enough to go on the bus tour with this afternoon and see the city, to give us a kind of a review of the missing middle housing. Is that correct? All right, Tony, thank you.
Thank you,
Commissioners, and everyone else watching this meeting. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for inviting Opticos to Coeur d'Alene. Everyone told me it was beautiful, and you've heard this a million times, that it really is super beautiful.
One thing I forgot to ask, can everyone hear us? Can you hear us back there okay? Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
I just have to say that the quality of the light and air here is really noticeable. You can see much farther than you can where I'm from in California. And even though we live on the coast and have good air quality, it's just, you can really see it, and the way the light is here, and it was in the afternoon. Anyway, you've heard it's beautiful. I'm just telling you what you've already heard. It's very beautiful here. We're here, Opticos is here to participate in the Missing Middle Housing Forum tomorrow. And I drove around with the staff today around the whole city and looked at all kinds of neighborhoods and some examples, local examples that you have of missing middle. And basically, for those who don't know what it is, it's not a new thing. It's actually an old thing. And it was up until about the 1940s in nearly every community in the country that is that old has some missing middle in it. And it's basically this: house scale buildings with multiple units in walkable neighborhoods. That's the simplest. We've worked on condensing the description down, and that's the tightest we can get it. So it's always not bigger than a house. It has multiple units in it, whether it's 2 or 6 or 8, sometimes more, depending on the size of that box. And then it's always in proximity to amenities, things that you want to walk to, whether they're restaurants, services, or transit, or maybe just transit. There's always something proximate to those units. They're never out by themselves like apartment projects. That's one of the big ways they're different. And the other big difference is that they vary in size. That's how they came to be, is not everybody back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s could afford a big house or wanted a big house, so they opted for something smaller. And so what we're learning is either both ends, the millennials and then my age bracket of the baby boomers, are downsizing. The millennials are looking for something different than the parents of the baby boomers or parents of the millennials, and the parents of the millennials are looking for something different than they have too. Not everyone, but a lot of them. And so this is appealing to both ends of the spectrum in terms of unit size and proximity to amenities. Tomorrow I'll be joining the other speakers to talk about that, and I'll give you examples from across the country and talk about some of the issues involved with considering this, or as I like to say, reconsidering it, because it already exists in every community in one way or another. It's just re-allowing it because the modern zoning sort of wiped that out and wiped out a bunch of other subtleties of communities that it didn't recognize. And then I'll give you the firm description last. I got into that. It's so fun to talk about. But Opticos Design, we're the biggest we've ever been in the 8 years that I've been there, and we're at 24 people, I think, including everybody in the building, administration, everybody. So 24 of us, architects, urban designers, and we work on walkable places. So what we do across the country for cities is go and look at the places like this, whether they're missing middle or not, the places that have proximity to amenities, places that want to build them from scratch or already exist, and we either work on their zoning, like in the case of a citywide zoning code, we do that kind of work, or we work on a neighborhood, or we work on a building. So for example, we designed a missing middle project in Papillon, Nebraska. It's called Prairie Queen. And that is 80 acres of this from just out of the ground. So it's built with a little new Main Street, a little neighborhood center for it in the form of a Main Street, and then 80 acres of neighborhoods with this kind of housing. So we do the architecture, we do the urban design, but what I focus on is actually codes. So if you've heard about form-based codes, that's what I've been doing for 20 years. And missing middle housing is implemented best through form-based codes, not exclusively, but best. So that's what I do. That's a little bit about the office, a little about me, and anyway, just want to take this opportunity to say hi and introduce the firm and introduce myself. So.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, I look forward to seeing you
Yeah,
tomorrow.
likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. At this time, we'll go into our public hearings, and there's only 2 public hearings, but there's 2 sign-up sheets. If you wish to speak on either one of these, just make sure you sign up, and we'll have you come up if you care to speak. And Tammy will give us an overview of the first one, which is to allow for a 10-foot setback along Birch Avenue rather than the required 20-foot setback for a proposed 2-car garage.
Thank you, Commissioners.
You're welcome.
So the applicant this evening and property owner is Tracia Mantia, and her address is 6273 North Lafayette Lane in Coeur d'Alene. And this is a request for a 10-foot setback along a street frontage rather than the 20-foot required for an accessory structure that would be directly accessed from a street side. The property address is 1059 2nd Street. And again, that's the request for a variance for a setback. This is an aerial photo of the site. This is Birch Avenue, 2nd Street, and then to the rear of the property is an alley. And specifically, we're going to be talking about a request for a variance in this vicinity along Birch Avenue. So in May of 2019, the property owner submitted a building permit application for a proposed garage to be located in the rear portion of the subject property, which is located on Birch Street in the northwest corner of Birch Avenue and 2nd Street. The applicant resides at 6273 North Lafayette Lane in Coeur d'Alene and rents out the primary residence located on that site. Upon review, it was determined that the proposed street side setback along Birch Avenue did not meet the code requirement of 20 feet for the garage or carport that would be directly accessed from the street. The applicant submitted a site plan, and that's on page 8 of your staff report, with a proposed 22 by 35-foot garage to be accessed along Birch Avenue with the proposed 10-foot setback. So the purpose, again, of the request is to request a variance to allow a 10-foot setback rather than the 20-foot setback. So the procedure for a variance is outlined under City Code, Section 1709-615, and consistent with state law. An application for a variance from a provision of this title with respect to a modification of the requirements of this title as to lot size, lot coverage, width, depth, front yard, side yard, rear yard, setbacks, parking provisions, height of buildings, or other ordinance provisions affecting the size or shape of a structure or placement of the structure upon lots or the size of lots shall be considered by the Planning Commission with an appeal allowable to the City Council. A variance shall not be considered a right or a special privilege, but granted to an applicant only upon showing of undue hardship because of characteristics of the site and that the variance is not in conflict with public interest. Circumstances warranting a variance would be natural and physical site characteristics such as rock outcroppings or natural spring. A variance may not be self-imposed. So I'll show you a couple site photos before I get into the information in the staff report. So this is looking west along Birch Avenue and 2nd Street at the subject property. And this is the principal structure here in the front along 2nd Street here, and this is Birch. And you'll see it does slope along that side of the property. This is a view of the subject property looking east from the alley toward the single family. And this is the alley, and it does have a couple step downs here. This is a view along Birch Avenue looking toward the alley and subject property to the northwest. Again, the single family here, alley is here, and this is Birch. And view from East Birch Avenue looking north toward the alley and the subject property. So this is approximately where they want to have that driveway to approach the garage along Birch. There is also an alternative, which would be along the alley. The current zoning of the property is R12, and this is outlined here where the subject property is. Surrounding that area is also R12 with C17 here and C17 located here to the northeast. As far as land use, the neighborhood is mostly surrounded by single families as well, with some duplex housing and again, commercial to the north. Specifically, the code section 1706460 states that garages or carports that are directly accessed to the street shall be set back 20 feet from the property line or public sidewalk located on the lot, whichever provides the greater setback. There are no sidewalks along Birch Avenue at the present time. And this is a graphic handout that we typically give to citizens depicting the setbacks. And so along an alley, you would have a 3-foot setback and a 5-foot setback on each side. And then in this example, if you were going to access this garage along this street, you would need to set this back 20 feet. And the applicant's site plan is included in your staff report for the proposed garage. This is Birch Avenue down here. And there's approximately 11 feet of right-of-way from the property line depicted in this graphic along Birch. And then this would be the proposed driveway, and then they've noted this would be a 16-foot roll-up door to access the garage. And this is the proposed south elevation for the garage that the applicant would like to construct. So as far as required findings, pursuant to section 1709-620, which is the variance criteria I read, a variance may be granted only when the applicant has demonstrated that all of the variance criteria conditions are present in the affirmative. And so I'll go through each one of these findings in my presentation. Finding B8A, there is undue hardship because of the physical characteristics of the site. And I've included all of the text in your staff report, and I've picked out a portion of it, and I'll skim over some of it. There's a slight elevation change on the southwest portion of the subject property, tapering down on the west toward the alley, as well as a plus or minus 3-foot elevation change along the right-of-way along Birch Avenue, where the applicant is proposing the 10-foot access point to enter the proposed garage. However, the remainder of the lot is relatively flat. The applicant has noted in the narrative, which is included in the staff report, that due to the lot size, which is a 35 by 100 foot, difficulty accessing the garage from the alley due to the steepness of the site, and other reasons associated with site topography are the hardships in the request. And staff has determined that this finding is not met. The property is similar to many other properties within the city, and the property does not have any physical characteristics or topographic issues that would prohibit the applicant from accessing the property off of the alley. And the applicant would need to demonstrate to the Planning Commission how they have met that finding. Finding B8B, the variance is not in conflict with the public interest. So in determining if the proposed request for a 10-foot setback along the street frontage for direct access, rather than the required 20-foot setback, will not be in conflict with public interest, the Commission can only consider the impact of that 10-foot portion of the setback that will be decreased from the code requirement, which is half of the required distance. The intent for that requirement of the 20-foot setback allows for the public to pass along the Birch Avenue right-of-way without impeding the pedestrian pathway, not having a vehicle hanging out onto the street, as well as not entering the street when backing from the garage. And in addition, an alternative access point could be along the alley from Birch Avenue. Finding B8C, the granting of said variance will be in conformance with the comprehensive plan. And this property falls within the historical heart area in the comp plan, which is stable established. And these areas are where the character of the neighborhood has largely been established and in general should be maintained. The street network, the number of building lots, and general land use are not expected to change greatly in the planning period. And this is the approximate location of the single family there. And your staff report includes the characteristics of the historical neighborhood, as well as the plans and objectives from the comp plan. Staff's recommendation, staff has determined that this application does not meet all 3 of the required findings that are needed in order to approve the variance. The spirit of the code that requires a 20-foot driveway length was codified to prevent this scenario. It anticipates that at a point in the future, a sidewalk would be installed, and the code allows for a distance needed for a car to sit between the garage door and an existing future sidewalk. If this is approved, there is potential for a vehicle to sit partially on private property with the tail end of the vehicle hanging out onto the city-owned right-of-way. If 20-foot required setback when directly accessing a garage or structure from the street is not an appropriate maximum distance for the rear yard, the zoning code should be reevaluated. So the action alternative is the planning commission must consider the request and make the appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. And the applicant is also here this evening. Any questions for staff?
Okay, thanks, Tammy.
You're welcome.
And is the applicant here? Okay, I just need to get your name and I'll swear you in.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners.
do you
Tracy
swear to-
Mantia.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go right ahead.
Do you think there's a box I could stand on? Maybe I can. Can you see me?
Good to see you. Don't worry about it.
Okay, so I am that property owner, and I plan to be occupying that property. Right now, I'm renting a property, and I want to move into my little house that I own. I've recently been caring for my elderly mother, and that's why I rented another property. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Take
But,
it easy.
but as I was caring for my elderly mother, I started thinking about my future and what it was like to be aging and being in a place that I was so dependent on other people. And so I started thinking about how I wanted to spend the rest of my life, you know, as a single woman, and how I would be able to care for myself in a convenient and safe environment. And I've owned this property for many years, and I've always loved that little property and rented it out, and always thought, gee, I'd love to live there, you know, because it's in Midtown. So I started thinking about how I could make that property suitable for myself as I age. And so building a garage is mandatory because I need to have a place to park my car. I don't really want to park on the street. It's very difficult to have to dig your car out of the, you know, snow, et cetera. So I designed this garage, and I had a garage there before, and the driveway was on Birch Street, so silly me not looking at the building codes. And I hired somebody, actually, and I thought that they would have said something, but they didn't. So I was all set to have, you know, this garage with the Birch Street access. And then I found out I needed the 20-foot driveway. Well, the lot's only 35 feet wide, so that wasn't going to work. But then I started thinking about the access from the alley into the garage and how there's kind of this steep incline that goes up into my property, and then having to make a sharp turn into the garage, and how difficult that would be in the snow and the ice. And I also have a friend who lives on an alley that has experienced some property damage due to their neighbors trying to get into their garage that's on the alley across from them. So, you know, it appeared to me as though it would be difficult, and especially as I age and, you know, become a little more, you know, not quite so sharp as I'm maneuvering my car. And then I also started thinking about, well, what happens when I'm not able to drive my car anymore and I need some mobility? So, you know, a lot of people get around Midtown and other urban areas on their little scooters, you know, once they have come to a place in their life that they're not quite as mobile and they don't have people to rely on to, you know, drive them places. And you see them driving around on their little scooters. So trying to get in and out of an alley on a scooter could be a challenge as well, because the alleyways are not paved. They are deeply rutted by the garbage trucks. I don't believe it's the property owner's responsibility to maintain alleys. I could be wrong. I really don't know how that works. But the snow removal doesn't happen in the alley, because I do know how bad that is, as I've tried to access. I have another property on an alley that I've tried to access in the wintertime, and I wonder how my neighbors or, you know, my renters are able to get in and out of the alley with the deep rutted snow that's there. So I'm thinking that, to have the kind of accessibility that I'm looking for, to be independent as an elderly person, it would just benefit me most to have a paved driveway going directly into a street that is plowed in the wintertime and maintained. So I can maintain my driveway. I could even put heaters in my driveway to melt the snow so that I don't have to be out there shoveling snow. So there's all kinds of ways that I can become an independent person if I am given the opportunity to be that way and not be dependent on other people to take care of me. And I know that there are accommodations made for people with disabilities. Now, right now, I am not disabled, but I don't know what my next 20 years is going to look like. My mother wasn't disabled until well into her late 80s, and then she became less mobile. But if she was living in an urban environment, she may have been able to get out and walk around more if it was safe for her. So I'm trying to create this safe, mobile environment for myself as I age in place. So I'm asking you to let me put my driveway in. I don't see any problem with sidewalks because there's never been a sidewalk there. Probably won't ever be a sidewalk. There are many areas of this city that do not have sidewalks, and in that neighborhood, there are at least 3 streets just between First and Second that don't have sidewalks. And it doesn't seem to be a problem for people who are pedestrians, to get through from First to Second Street. And I just ask that you give me the variance, living in Coeur d'Alene and be independent. That's probably not a very compelling argument, but
Okay, well, appreciate that. Do we have any questions? No? Okay, if there's any questions later on, I'm sure we can.
oh, one more thing.
Sure.
Okay. So, getting back to the handicap accessibility. I also have a brother who I'm not taking care of now. He lives in the Philippines. However, I anticipate that eventually he could be moving back here so that I could possibly help him. And he is an amputee, and that's another thought that I have in the back of my head about how I might be able to help a brother as well. Anyway.
I do have a question. It's a fairly large structure for a garage, and I see the drawing that you have and the picture of the architectural picture. Are you planning just to have storage in the area where there's not a car, or what is that?
No,
Where
the
door
house-
and that space.
Right, that would be a good question. The house is pretty small, and so I want to have a craft room. There is a full basement, but the accessibility for the basement is like almost a trapdoor kind of situation.
Sure.
So I don't want to have my craft room, workshop, in the basement. So I have, when I was talking to the building department, they approved that space as like a craft room, and I plan to put a bathroom in it as well so that it can be used for myself to,
Okay,
not have to go all the way back in the house.
I can understand that.
I do not plan on renting it out. That was a big thing.
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
No? All right, well, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, commissioners.
You're welcome. I have just one person, Heidi Fisher, who is in favor and does want to speak. And I'll just get your name and I'll swear you in, Heidi.
Heidi Fisher.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, go right ahead, Heidi.
I just want to start off by disclosing that I know Tracy. I consider her a friend. But the reason that I'm here is that I also happen to own property in that general neighborhood. I got a notice that this variance was being requested. And so I took some interest in it in terms of the neighborhood, and I'm here primarily to talk about the public interest piece. My husband and I came to Coeur d'Alene in 1980 from the Midwest via Colorado, and we chose to live in the historic heart from day one of our arrival, and bought our home at 1124 Coeur d'Alene Avenue in 1986, where I live to this day. And we chose to live in the historic heart back in a time when it was not cachet to live in the historic heart, and most people were looking to live outside of Coeur d'Alene. And we chose to live in the downtown area for the very reason that the gentleman spoke, at the beginning of this meeting, because we wanted a pedestrian-friendly place to live. And for over 30 years, we had have our business at 212 South 11th Street, and we shopped at the old Safeway on 4th Street, and so on and so forth, because we wanted a lifestyle that was you bike and you walk virtually everywhere you go. So I fully appreciate the importance of that, and I think it's a great goal for the city to have. The property that I own in this area is at 1069 First Street. It's a fourplex, and almost all the tenants that have lived there, maybe about half of them have vehicles. The other half, and we've owned that property since I think the early 90s. They, maybe they work at Sonia's Dry Cleaning or at the Albertsons, or they go to NIC, and they're interested in walkability. And there is no laundry facilities at that building, and they go to the laundromat on 4th Street. So this is a high priority. But that neighborhood also is what and this isn't a technical term, but I consider it like a pocket neighborhood, because it's this little pocket with Harrison on the north, bounded by Harrison on the north, Government Way on the west, 3rd Street on the east, and then Miller on the south. And unlike the neighborhood I live in, or many of the other neighborhoods in town, there's no, it's not going to ever be a place, and it isn't now, where people, drive straight through, because there's this twisty-turny stuff, and there's not straight thoroughfares to get through. So there's not only on these east-west streets that Tracy's talking about, but on First Street, there's not sidewalks. There are, not many sidewalks in that whole neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And this particular part that she's talking about, although it's a right-of-way, and the idea is to allow pedestrians to use the right-of-way, you can't use that right-of-way because it is a 3-foot incline. There's no way you can walk on that right now. So I guess what I'm getting at is, it seems to me that if the city has priorities about where to get sidewalks in place, this area probably ought to be lower on the list, because it's pretty well protected by the way it's kind of a pocket. And if I thought that my tenants were going to be impacted negatively by this, or my belief in walkability as a high priority would be negatively impacted by this. I'm coming at this from a public interest standpoint, and I think, may it be modestly impacted? Yes, I suppose so, but I don't think that this request is significantly at variance with that public interest. So I just wanted to come and make those comments and say that I have no objection, although I'm a property in the area. And we do, where I live, at 1124 Coeur d'Alene Avenue, within the last 5 years, neighbor behind us put in a garage. And the thing I find with these, whatever the setback is from the alleyways, at least, whoops.
That's
I guess
okay,
I'm
go
done.
ahead. That's all right.
you know, most people, well, I don't know about most people, but certainly my neighbors have a difficulty with that turning radius. It's a single-car garage, and they come in, and they don't just come in and turn. They come in and they swoop out this way. And that has caused some damage on my property, and it also seems to cause a, for lack of a better word, divot in the alley. So there's always a, you know, depression hole that we gotta go out and fill with gravel. So I don't know all the technical stuff, but I'm not sure necessarily that the alley access is as easy as it may sound.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. I don't have anyone else signed up to speak. Tracy, before I close public testimony and give it to the commissioners to make a decision, do you have anything else you want to add before I close public testimony? Okay, thank you. I'll close public testimony at this time and bring it to the commissioners to talk about. John?
Mr. Chairman, this one's a tough one. We had another one that was difficult this year, I believe it was this year, with 10-inch variance of a roof that was constructed that didn't meet code. It really didn't, at the end of the day, it didn't really matter whether a lot was impacted over this 10 inches. It's a legal duty that we have. We have to make a finding. We had to make a finding. And the finding was whether there's an undue hardship, not a hardship for the people that live there, or, you know, there's disabilities involved or age involved. Those aren't the criteria for an undue hardship. The undue hardship has to do with the physical characteristics of the site. And as I understand it, sitting up here, is state code impacts us as well as our city code on what the definition of an undue hardship is. And I would say it's a very, very, very high bar. It's very difficult to achieve. And for that reason, we see very, very few variances approved. It's just very few are approvable. And I think that sometimes we have a great thought and a dream to put something on a site, and at the end of the day, unfortunately, you know, a 22 by 35 garage is desirable, but maybe just too big. It may be just too much, and sometimes we have to drop back and reevaluate and figure out another way to do it. So at the end of the day, I just don't see how we, sitting up here, can make a finding of undue hardship based on the physicalities of the site. You know, there's hundreds, maybe thousands of similar homes served by alleys in this town. It may mean a smaller garage that you will have to live with, but you know, really this comes down to, does this grant a special privilege, or is there really indeed unique physical constraints to that site? So I don't see how we can approve it. I wish we could be more flexible sometimes, but I don't know how we can get there.
And you have anything to add to this?
No, I tend to agree with John. And I also see this garage is oversized for the adjacent house. It's almost overpowering. So I just don't, yeah, it's hard to justify this. And the street off the lane, you're, 20 feet off the street. So the complaint about, accessibility is a weak story. So I don't see how we would do it either. I just don't see it.
Okay. Anyone else?
I would,
Go ahead, Peter.
I appreciate the comments. I appreciate, viewing for your future. I think you're very well spoken. I think that the sympathy was with you, well, at least my part is with you. but it goes between that and what the code says. So I support denying the variance. But you did speak very well, and those that were watching, I wish they would come in the future and speak, because it adds to our discussion. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah?
Yeah, I tend to agree with the other commissioners that based on both the city and state code, I'm not sure we can make the finding.
Okay. Lou?
Well, I was just hoping for some commissioner input and some conversation here to illuminate my choice, and I appreciate what was shared, John. I think you were very, very clear about this, and I just can't see how we can, support a finding to enable this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and having a hard time seeing you over the TV screen there, but I have to agree with the commissioners, and it's not that, we're trying to say, gee, you can't have a garage. You could probably maybe design something a little bit differently and perhaps have it work, but we're bound by what Commissioner Ingalls said, by state requirements, and and unfortunately, as you can tell, this probably won't pass. That we'll have to perhaps have you build a different type of structure, or I don't know what else we can say. Okay. At this time, I'd like to have a motion from one of the commissioners, please. Yeah, John.
I'll muddle through the worksheet, if I could, in the form of a motion in making the findings and order for V219, and introduce a motion that this being a matter that's come before the Planning Commission tonight, August 13, 2019, and there being present a person requesting approval of item V219, a request for a variance in the R2 zoning district, applicant Tracy Mantilla, for a plus or minus 4,138 square foot parcel at 1059 Second Street. Motion that we adopt findings B1 through B7 in our worksheet as statements of fact. B8, that we adopt a finding that there is not an undue hardship because of the physical characteristics of the site do not demonstrate that the issue is one of overcoming some unique physical hardship of the site. Topography, there's nothing of that nature. The rock outcroppings or something of that nature that just prevents the practical constructability here. So B8A, that there is not a unique hardship. B8B, that the variance is not or is in conflict with the public interest, and it would make that assertion based on the fact that this would result in a special right or privilege for the applicant. B8C, that the variance would not be in conformance with the comp plan with respect to objective 1.11 community design features. So with that, Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that the request of Tracy Mantilla for a variance as described in the application should be denied.
I have a first. Any further discussion on that? Before I get my second on this, I'd also check with staff. If the applicant wants to appeal this, she could to City Council, or is that not appealing?
Yes, there is an option to appeal it to City Council.
So, I mean, there's that option as well. And again, I'm sure social media as it being, I'm sure that we'll get some comments that way, and I just hope the general public understands we're not here trying to be denying something because we just don't want it. We are here bound by what the state says and our codes, and that's basically the foundation of what Mr. Ingalls has said in his comments on it. So I hope the general public understands that, because we do get quite a few comments that sometimes aren't quite correct on why we make decisions and stuff, and sometimes they try to make us look like the bad people, and we're not. We're We're here to help, but sometimes we just can't say yes. I need a second?
I will second it, and I just
I have a sec-
reiterate that John gave the listings of why we take our position. You know, I think and that's very valid, that's what we try to do here, and that, so I second it.
I have a second by Lutrip. Roll call, Shannon?
Fleming,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Mandel,
Yes.
Lutrip,
Yes.
Rumpler.
Yes.
Okay. Item number V-2-19 is not approved. Okay. Thank you for your time on that. The next hearing is a proposed 0.84 acre annexation from county agriculturals to city R3. You're welcome.
All right, the second item this evening is a request for an annexation. The applicant is ATS, and the property owner, or their intent is to, I guess, lease to own, TJ Ross. Subject is a zoning designation prior to annexation for a .84 acre parcel located east of 19th Street and north of East Nettleton Gulch Road. And the zoning designation requested tonight is R3 zoning. This is the subject property located on East Nettleton Gulch Road, and this is 19th, and this is Saytree Avenue. And this is the subject property. The applicant has also submitted the annexation exhibit showing the outline of the property they wish to be annexed today, or the request for annexation, excuse me. This is the existing city limit line right here, and it is contiguous with our boundary along this area. I've included an annexation history map, and this is where the subject property is located, and as you can see by the dates of these annexations, we haven't had one in this area for quite some time. Most recent was A406. So I'll get into a little bit of the site photos. The view of the subject property looking north at the single-family and accessory structure that's currently located on the property. And this is a single family with the accessory building. And this is the Nettleton Gulch frontage. View of the subject property looking north at the single family again. Does have a paved driveway. And this is a view along East Nettleton Gulch looking at the neighboring property to the south. And this is an area with single families and larger parcels in the R3 zone. This is a view looking east along Saytree Avenue, which is a secondary frontage of the subject property. And this is what we consider to be a double frontage lot. This is a view looking at the subject property from the secondary frontage along Saytree Avenue. And staff has had a discussion with the applicant's representative about our double frontage lot regulations and that they would have to put a vegetative buffer in because we only allow access on one point of the frontage. And I'll get into a little more of that. So the R3 zoning district is intended as a residential area that permits single-family detached housing at a density of 3 units per gross acre. And this district is intended for those areas of the city that are developed at this density or are preferably developed at the density because of factors such as vehicular access, topography, flood hazard, or landslide hazards. And I'll cover all 4 of these findings as I go through my staff report this evening. Finding B8, that this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan policies. And the subject property, as I mentioned, is contiguous with the existing city limits, and it's designated as the Northeast Prairie in our comp plan. And this is the vicinity of the subject property, and it's noted in the purple, which is stable established. And your staff report includes the information on the Northeast Prairie today, and Northeast Prairie tomorrow is noted in the comprehensive plan, along with the comprehensive plan goals and objectives on pages 6 and pages 7. Finding B9, that public facilities and utilities are not available and adequate for the proposed use. So I'll briefly cover these. They're located in your staff report on pages 7 and 8. As far as stormwater, it'll be addressed as the area proposed for annexation develops, and it must be contained on site. And they would be required to submit additional information at a time of a building permit if they chose to do that. as far as getting a permit on new structure. The planning department's requirements. The subject property is a double frontage lot due to the street frontages along East Nettleton Gulch Road and Satre Avenue. Because the frontages along two opposite boundaries are not allowed per section 1615-180, the applicant will be required to submit a landscape plan for approval and provide the required 10-foot wide vegetative buffer along Satre Avenue. And I'll speak to the traffic when I get into the land use portion. As far as streets, the subject site is currently developed, and the site has frontage along the north side of Nettleton Gulch Road. Any necessary improvements to the street frontage would be addressed during future construction. The Streets and Engineering Department has no objection to the annexation request. There is adequate capacity in the public water system to support domestic irrigation and fire flow for the proposed annexation. And there is an existing 6-inch water main in East Nettleton Gulch Road. And there is wastewater, public sewer available for this annexation via an 8-inch sewer main in Satre to the north. And the fire department provided some comments talking about road width, surfacing, maximum grade, turning radiuses, and all those things could be addressed at site for building permit submittals. Finding B10, that the physical characteristics of the site make or do not make it suitable for the request at this time. So the .84 acre parcel on the east side of 19th Street and the north side of East Nettleton Gulch Road, the site does have a double frontage lot, or does have double frontage with the existing access along Nettleton Gulch Road. It is generally flat with several existing trees located on the site. There are existing structures, including a single-family dwelling unit and an accessory structure on the south portion of the site. The physical characteristics of the site appear to be suitable for the request at this time. Finding B11, that the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. And the subject property is currently being used as a single family, and there's an accessory building on the site. And as I mentioned, the rest of it is vacant. It's in a neighborhood of single-family residences as far as a few vacant parcels. And it does have, the property currently is abutting city properties. And the R3 zoning is requested in conjunction with annexation, which is consistent with the neighboring zoning. As far as traffic, the proposed annexation itself would not affect the surrounding area with regard to traffic, as no traffic is generated from the annexation alone. And the Streets and Engineering Department did not object to the annexation as proposed. So this is the existing land use map, and this is the subject property located here. And the yellow indicates single-family dwellings and duplex housing. And then there's counties, or property within Kootenai County with single-family dwellings and vacant parcels. This is the existing zoning map. Again, the R3 single families, and R12 zoning, and R8 PUDs. So the requested zoning in conjunction with annexation is consistent with the surrounding zoning. So as far as the proposed items for an annexation agreement, I did mention that the planning department would ask that the 10-foot wide vegetative buffer is provided along that 2nd Street frontage along Satre. Building department, prior to the completion of the annexation, the applicant must address any outstanding code violations for existing structures on site. Water department, any additional main extensions and/or fire hydrant services will be a responsibility of the developer at their expense. And any additional service will have cap fees due at the time of building permit issuances. And the last one is all newly created lots within the city are required to connect to public sewer conforming to all Coeur d'Alene sewer policies and standards. So the Planning Commission must consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. Any questions for staff?
Quick question. If this comes into the city and they choose to subdivide this lot facing Satre, however you want to call it, because that seems to be the unoccupied part of the lot. Is there any way to, I'm worried about the vegetative. You plant something, you yank something, and it's very, to me, it's very counterproductive. So do we give them a time frame at which that must be in place Because I'm worried that, we plant something and then they turn around in a year and subdivide, and then you rip that all out, which would be a shame.
I think it would be coordinated with the annexation agreement, if I'm speaking to this correctly, as far as the timing to plan it before everything was final.
Okay.
I'm not sure that that lot's big enough because it's the R3 zoning and it takes a large parcel to have 2 single families on it.
Hard to know. Okay.
Thanks, Sammy. I have Tiffany Espy from ATS, representing the applicant. Let's state your name and I'll swear you in.
Tiffany Espy.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay.
I'm with ATS. We represent the property owner. We have one property owner here. There are a few for this piece of property in particular. We do find the staff report and the presentation provided from staff very thorough, so we don't really have anything to add at this time. If we have any questions we can answer, we'll be happy to do that.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. On the sign-up sheet, I have TJ Ross, did not wish to testify. And then I have Steve and Melissa Yost, and again, they do not wish to testify. So, thank you, Tiffany, you don't have anything else to add. I'm going to close public hearing and bring it to the commissioners for a motion and discussion.
For me, in reviewing the staff report and looking at the site map, it seems that the annexation would be, the zoning change would be consistent with the other zoning in the vicinity and compatible with the surrounding area and meets the requirements of city services. I did note there were some provisions that were recommended from staff to be included in the annexation agreement. I don't know if there's any further comment from staff on those, but they make sense.
You want to do the findings, or?
Is there any more discussion?
I agree with you. Seems to make sense. You want to make a motion?
Seems pretty straightforward.
Okay,
Go
I'll
for
make a
it.
motion. This matter having come before the Planning Commission on August 13th, 2019, and there being present a person requesting approval of item A-4-19, a request for zoning prior to annexation from County Agriculture Suburban to City R3. The applicant is TJ Ross, and the location is a 0.84 acre parcel located east of 19th Street and north of East Nettleton Gulch Road. For findings, we can adopt items B1 through 7 as presented. For B8, we find that this proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan policies as follows with community design, efficiency, connectivity, I think specifically, and city services. For finding B9, the public facilities are available and adequate for the proposed use as included in the staff report. For finding B10, that the physical characteristics of the site do make it suitable for the request at this time, based on its compatibility and consistency with the surrounding area. For finding B11, that the proposal would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and existing land uses. The proposed zoning is compatible with the surrounding area and the existing land use pattern. So by order, the Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds that the request of TJ Ross for zoning prior to annexation as described in the application should be approved with suggested provisions for inclusion in an annexation agreement, specifically planning a 10-foot minimum wide vegetative buffer required along the secondary street frontage on Satre Avenue due to the subject property being a double frontage lot. For the building, prior to competition of the annexation, the applicant must address any outstanding code violations for the existing structures. For water, any additional main extensions and/or fire hydrants and services will be the responsibility of the developer at their expense. Any additional service will have cap fees due at the time of building permit issuance. For wastewater, all newly created lots within the city are required to connect to the public sewer system, conforming to all CDA sewer policies and standards.
I'll second that motion.
I have a first and second. Roll call, Shannon?
Fleming,
Yes?
Ingalls,
Yes.
Mandel,
Yes.
Lutrip,
Yes.
Rumpler.
Yes.
Okay, A-4-19 passes. Thank you. Okay, Peter, your turn.
And Mr. Chairman, before I make a motion to adjourn,
Yes.
at last council meeting, there was a presentation to a young lady, a young woman, for his Girl Scouts, and she won quite a significant award in scouting. And she had an opportunity to come up and speak, and she was extremely articulate. And she's going to MIT in this fall, and she made a commitment to the mayor that she, upon graduation, she'd return to Coeur d'Alene. Now, she wasn't sworn in, so I don't know how much that commitment is, other than her heart's in the right place. And I was looking at it, there are a lot of young people out there, and they get to this maturity through experience and so forth. And I thought, well, maybe some jurisdictions ask scout groups to come and give the Pledge of Allegiance. It takes a few minutes. The scouting group can come here, they can have a spokesman and whatnot. I assume that they get some type of, I used to call them merit badges, I don't know if they still do, for government and so forth. And it gives them an introduction to government. It gives them an opportunity to be briefly on television, but it might inspire them to go a little bit further in government and certainly give us a flavor for what the youth is like that we have in our community. With that thought, I would just like to suggest to the city that maybe we can pursue, if there's enough groups out there that would be interested, to give the Pledge of Allegiance for us. It would not take long, but that's all.
Anyone's welcome to come to any of our meetings, and if someone wants to do the Pledge of Allegiance, have at it.
Well,
I'm okay with it.
I was thinking of having a structured thing where you reach out and contact the different scouting groups and so forth, ask if they want to do it.
Well, I guess staff can look into that, and, or any one of our commissioners can look into that as well and make any recommendations to staff, Peter.
I would be more than happy to look into that if you give me the authority.
Go right ahead.
My assumption would be that the answer is yes, they can give it.
I think it's great
Very
if we
good.
can get more of our young people from
Very good.
Coeur d'Alene to come up that are, I'm sure, very anxious to go back to school in a few weeks. And I know a lot of parents are very anxious for it. But anyway, yes, I think
good.
that's a great recommendation, and let's see where that goes.
Okay. With that, I move adjournment.
All right.
Second.
I have a motion to adjourn. I have a second. All in favor?
All right?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And thank you, and good night.